Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Getting Past the Gatekeeper. Now, I'm going to be sharing with you quite a bit of content here, and we're going to be rocking and rolling very, very quickly here. And of course, we've got the screen back here and so forth. But let me share with you why this topic, getting past the gatekeeper, is so important. One, it is without a doubt probably the biggest stumbling block that people run into. Now, I'm really excited about this because, again, this event today is brought to us by the folks at InfoFree. And they've got an amazing database that I have a chance to work in it quite a bit. And I find a tremendous amount of success with it. And I want to say thank you to everybody who uses it. And if you haven't, check it out. I really, really suggest you check it out. But anyway, what we're going to get into today is how do we get past the gatekeeper? And I'm going to be pulling content from a number of other clients I work with all up and down the B2B food chain. And I'm going to be sharing with you some content from my book, High Profit Prospecting. But hey, let's get into it. The gatekeeper is the roadblock. Whoa, hold on. They're not quite as big of a gatekeeper as we might think they are. Now, let's back up here for just a second because we've got to get kind of definition around the term gatekeeper. Now, remember, if you've followed me at all, you know that calls can go one of three ways. Gatekeeper can answer, the decision maker can answer, or it can simply go to voicemail. But let's break down gatekeeper, because there's four different types of gatekeepers, and it's very important to understand the difference between the four, okay? Number one is the receptionist, okay? And I'm going to talk about some strategies there. Number two is the administrative assistant. You know, the person who works for the decision maker that you know you need to get in touch with, but isn't letting you through. Three is the clueless person who just happens to answer the phone. And how many times have we reached out and found somebody like that? Yeah, we do. And those can be very proactive people. And the fourth type is just the robo. That's the automatic dialing system. And that's really, if you think about it, when we talk about gatekeepers, those are the four types of gatekeepers. Now, we really have to kind of break this down even further and really kind of have a strategy before we go into any one of these. Now, when I mean a strategy before we go into any one of these, what am I really talking about? What I'm talking about here is a little bit of a challenge, because each one of these four requires just a little bit different of a technique. In other words, the approach I'm going to use with a receptionist is going to be different than I use with an administrative assistant. But the problem is I don't necessarily know who it is I'm reaching when I initially make the call. I just don't know. So I've got to be able to pick up what are those instantaneous clues that I can run with. And here's the number one. This is the biggest single clue I'm going to share with you on this call. I've got some really good clues right here, and I got some more clues towards the end. Here's a key critical piece. One, never ask, hey, I'm looking for whoever is responsible for buying. Never use the word buying when you're speaking with a gatekeeper. And here's why. When you use the word buying, it triggers something in their mind. Oh, they need to move you to purchasing. Ah, that's purgatory. That is the last place you want to be. But that's exactly what happens, is that they move you immediately to purchasing. Never, ever use the word buying. That's rule number one. Never say, hey, who's in charge of purchasing? No, never do that. You never want to give a clue in your initial question that is going to lead them to believe that they can just simply route you to purchasing. Because in their mind, that's where all salespeople belong. That's where all vendors belong, is over in purchasing. But we all know that that's the last place we want to be. So what I want to do is I want to be asking that question, who's responsible for? I never say who's responsible for purchasing. I just say who's responsible for software, who's responsible for pest control, who's responsible for this. That's where I want my call to go. But now here's another quick little piece that I found. One, listen for how they answer the telephone. This is a real quick indication as to whether or not I'm dealing with an administrative assistant or the receptionist. How many times have you called somebody and they answer the phone and you can't even determine whether or not whether or not who you're calling is the right person because they answer the phone so quickly. That's the receptionist. It is amazing how many times the receptionist will answer the phone very quickly. So the receptionist, I'm going to make sure that I come in and I say right up front, hey, my whole objective is, can you connect me with who is responsible for X? That's where I want to go with my initial phone call. Now, let's stop and step back one more question. Because the other fatal question that people tend to ask gatekeepers is, how's the weather? How's your day going? How are things going? I'm sorry, but if I'm talking to a receptionist, that's probably not what I'm looking at. I just want to get this call out of here. Now, if I've dialogued with you a little bit, I can ask a question like that. I'm not going to ask weather. That's stupid. But I can ask, how's your day going? How's your week going? How was your weekend? I can ask that. But I don't ask right up front. You see, what I want to do is I want to earn you've heard me talk about this, earn the right, the privilege, honor, and respect. Yeah, because what I want to do is I want to earn the right to be able to ask that question. Because now if I've engaged with you for 20 or 30 seconds and you're trying to figure out who to connect me to and so forth, and I ask, hey, how's your day going? See, I've earned the right to ask that question. And it doesn't come across as, oh, this is just a stupid salesperson. You see, because that's the last thing I want to come across as. Now, let's step back and let's look at the other approaches, okay? Now, let's do the auto dial. Here's something I found. I'm going to hit an auto dial multiple times. Why? Because I'm going to learn different key pieces of information. I may, in fact, if it's a large enough opportunity, not even look to attempt to connect on the first one, but really just kind of fish around. Why? Because I'm trying to see what kind of information might be available on the automated system. Why? Because it's giving me clues as to who some other departments are, where it might be some other people. Now, if I go to 0, and this is always the tendency, just push 0 and you'll be connected with an operator. What are you going to get? You're going to get undoubtedly the receptionist. You're going to get maybe somebody in HR, somebody who's just charged with answering the telephone. And I found that normally doesn't work too well. See, so when I hit the auto dial, what I do is I want to go through the full menu, and then I'm going to reach out and push the button that's going to get me to the department that I think is going to be closest to where I want to go. Now, here's why. I'm no longer being routed to that person who's just charged with answering the phone. You see, that's one way I get around the gatekeeper. See, what's the automated system in place to do? It's to keep us out. So I just work my way around it. Now, don't hesitate at all. I may go into an automated system and gee, they say push 3 for this department or 4 for, okay, so I push 3 and I don't get anywhere. Just because I don't get anywhere with that department, don't think for a moment that I can't pick up the phone right away again and call a different department and push a different button. Now, keep in mind also, the automated system many times is put in place for after hours or when the normal receptionist is on break. I can live with that. And again, I'm going to use that as alternate strategies to get around the gatekeeper. Now, let's come back and let's deal with here for just a second regarding that person who answers the phone, but we can't really tell who they are. We can't tell if they're the gatekeeper or if they are the administrative assistant. Okay, so what am I doing here? I got to be thinking through how I'm going to ask my questions. Now, recently, I put an article out on LinkedIn, and it's elicited a tremendous amount of response on this topic. It's called the 10 Keys for Getting Past the Gatekeeper. Elicited a tremendous amount of response. And some people were blasting me saying, how can you sit there and say that you can ask the gatekeeper the same questions you would the decision maker? Well, I'm not going to if it's the receptionist, but I certainly am if it's the administrative assistant. But I'm probably going to phrase them a little bit differently. Let me give you an example as to how this might work. You might be selling in software. Okay. Now, one of the key things that you know is that your software really helps companies in their strategic planning process. And you have a great question for the decision maker. What are the key obstacles you face as you go into your strategic planning process each year? Hey, that's a great question. I may not ask that question the same way of the administrative assistant, but I am going to say this question. What kind of time frame are you on with regards to develop your strategic planning for next year? You see, what am I doing? I'm asking a question that's going to hopefully get me some information, but it's going to do two things for me. One, it demonstrates to the decision maker, the administrative assistant, who may be the decision maker, that I'm asking strategic questions. Now, a little bit of, I didn't mean to say that strategic, but I'm asking a question that is more than just, hi, I want to sell you some software. But what I'm doing is I'm asking the question in a manner that hopefully is going to get that administrative assistant saying, that's interesting. And they may share with you that information. Now, they may not share with you that information. That's okay. That's okay. Don't say that's boom. Oh no, I can't go any further. No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look to ask that administrative assistant a couple of questions. Now, here's a little bit of a neat little technique. And I want to talk about more about this later. But the administrative assistant may say, just send me some information. Now, I'm not crazy about that at all. But here's what I do like about it. The one element I like about it is I can learn the email setup, the email structure of the company I'm calling into. Because I can sit there and say, great, what's your email? Let me make sure I get it correct. Now, when I know that person's email, chances are I can then in turn figure out the decision maker if I know that person's name. Oh, but I don't know that person's name. That's okay. Because one of the questions I might ask the administrative assistant is, hey, who are some other people who are involved in the process? And all I'm doing is I'm looking for a name. Now, let's put that aside for just a moment and jump back over to the receptionist, because I want to give you some more clues, some more ideas as to how to get past that decision maker. Because right now, especially, we're in a really good time of year to be able to get past the decision maker. One, of course, is by using the clock. There's two types of receptionists that I found. One is the person who's been there for 40 years. They've been at the company for 40 years and they've manned that desk and they've done a great job. And the other is the person who literally just got hired and they can't stand it and they want to get off that job as fast as possible. That tends to be about the two extremes of what you tend to run into. The other extreme is the fill-in person. Remember the person who I said when I said the four types of a gatekeeper? The one who is clueless? Yeah, that's the one who's just filling in. So what I want to do is I'm going to use the clock. I'm going to use the clock to my advantage. I'm not going to hesitate to call a little before 8. I'm not going to hesitate to call after 5 p.m. or after 4:30. I'm not going to hesitate to call at 12:15. My goal is to catch one of those clueless people when they're filling in. Because many times the clueless people, they may not connect you, but they will share with you information. Here's what I found. And you can generally tell the clueless person. They generally, just because they just kind of stumble through what they're saying or whatever, and they're not quite there in terms of being focused on a call. But what I found is I can be a little bit more relaxed with those people. And they'll be more sharing in terms of information. Hey, how are things going around there? See, I can jump into a little bit of a friendly discussion earlier, faster. Now, here's what I found. Don't hesitate to leave with them your name. Now, I've had some salespeople push back on me and say, Mark, I don't want to leave them my name because Then they're gonna block my name. Well, excuse me, folks, but guess what? Everybody's got caller ID already. So guess what? They know what your phone number is. So don't even think that that's going to work. But what I found is that if I can leave them my name, that can work, because here's where it's going to come into play. I may get this person who is this, not quite, they're not the full-time receptionist. They've shared with me a little bit of information. And I can introduce myself. Well, hey, I'm Mark Hunter. Who are you? Now, here's where I'm not going to hesitate to play a card. I'm going to call back later on. And this, I'm going to admit, this has come back to bite me a couple times, but rarely has it done so. I can call back later on and say the normal person answers the phone. And I can say, hey, I was speaking to somebody else and they said I should call back a little bit later. Now, notice I'm not offering up their name quite that quick, because there's sometimes receptionists that are guarded and they'll jump them. That's where sometimes you can get in a little bit of trouble. But I'll sit there and say, I was talking to somebody else earlier and they shared with me and they said, I may want to call back later because you know who to route the call to. Oh, wow. You see what I just did? Suddenly, I've elevated in the mind of the receptionist that person's job. Suddenly, they're thinking, wow, hey, I'm really cool, you see. And it's amazing, again, how many times they will then, connect you with the person. Now, remember, when they connect with you, and remember, you may or may not know who the person is. I'm going to break this down two ways in just a moment here, okay? I'm going to break this down because here's the whole thing. If I don't know who the person is, I'm going to be sitting there and asking the question of, hey, who should I talk to with regards to X? Now, remember, they may come back to you and say, are you a salesperson looking to sell? And I will come back and I'll say, no. What I'm doing is I'm looking for some information. I'm trying to get some industry insights. Yeah, I'm going to be skating a little bit around. And some people say, Mark, that isn't integrity. And you always talk about using integrity. And I'll go, yeah, I admit it's a slippery slope. But here's why I'm okay with this. Because the receptionist is trained to move all salespeople to purchasing. But remember, do you believe in what you can do to help the customer? Do you believe that you can help them achieve a higher outcome, a higher level? Yeah. So guess what? Then you need to work your way past that gatekeeper, because the gatekeeper doesn't understand. So I'm going to go ahead and shade my comment slightly different. I might say, because I'm not in sales, I might be, hey, I'm in charge of operations for my company. I'm in charge of this, or I'm in strategic planning, or I'm in some other department. Great. You see, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to use this person to connect me with. Now, here's my whole key thing though. And this is if I don't know the person or if I do know the person. I want to make sure that I use these words. Hey, before you connect me, why don't you give me their extension just in case we get disconnected? Now, I love asking that question. And here's why. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to really make it seem like I'm doing them a service. Because how many times have we transferred calls and we get cut off, especially when you're reaching out to the person who doesn't normally work the switchboard? Oh man, they drop calls right and left. So you sit there and say, hey, what's their extension just in case we get disconnected? Boom. That is so critical, because now this allows you to do a direct dial around the gatekeeper. Now, what's cool about this is right there alone, I'm past the gatekeeper. Now, let's come back and let's talk about this whole thing again regarding the other type of gatekeeper, being the administrative assistant, okay? And what are some techniques? Now, I'm going to use the calendar. I'm going to use the clock. I'm not going to hesitate to call it noon and 12. Now, here's a little key thing. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but don't hesitate to call right at the top of the hour. Now, here's why, especially senior level people. In fact, this happened to me just the other day. I was sitting in the office of the president of a company. And this goes back, I'm sorry, not a few days ago, but this goes back about 5 weeks ago. I was sitting in the office of the president of a company. And it's funny, but his phone rang and rang. And he, of course, just totally ignored it. His administrative assistant, which sat right out front, was dutifully answering the call. But it was very interesting. Suddenly the phone rang. And he said, "Oh, I think that's my 10 o'clock appointment." And he picked up the phone. Now, what did he do? He knew it was 10 o'clock, and he knew he had an appointment at 10 o'clock. And he needed to take the call. Now, which meant he needed to get me out of his office. And I totally get that. But you see what happened? He answered the phone at the top of the hour. What I found is this. I can reach out and contact people at the top of the hour. And many times what happens is they will actually answer it because they think it's normally their 10 o'clock conference call, their 11 o'clock call, their 2 o'clock call. Now, that is going to be the one time when I'm not going to sit there and jump right into my discussion, because generally what they're going to realize is, whoa. Now, this person who I was talking to said, "Oh yeah, hey, just a moment. Great. I'm going to put you on hold for just a moment. I'm just wrapping up another meeting and I'll get right back to you." Put the person on hold and said, "Mark, thank you." Boom, boom, boom. And I left the office. Now, I've been on the other end of the situation when I've called and the person answered the phone and, whoa, very clearly knew that I wasn't their 10 o'clock meeting. And so I will sit there and say, "Hey, is this a good time to talk?" That's the only time I will ever sit there and ask somebody, "Is this a good time to talk?" When I know I've got a senior level person at the wrong time. And you know what's interesting is senior level people, and this guy was very forthcoming. He said, "No, it's not a good time." And I said, "When this afternoon might be good?" He looked at his calendar, said 4:15. Boom. I said, "Great. I'll call you back at 4:15. I called him back at 4:15 and he answered the phone. Senior level people will make commitments of time and will honor it. Lower level people will make commitments of time they know they can't keep as a way to get you out of there. It's their chicken way of getting rid of salespeople. But let's get off of that subject. Let's get back to this whole issue of using the time. Now, here's the other piece that really comes into play, especially right now, this time of year. Now, Jeb Blunt, many of you know who Jeb Blunt is. He wrote the book Fanatical Prospecting, and he also wrote the foreword for my book. He and I are in so much accord on this in terms of how to prospect. But we firmly believe this is without a doubt a great time of year. Now, great time of year. Some of you are going to be listening to this well after the first of the year. What I'm talking about is the end of the year, the last couple of weeks of the year. This is one, if you've got people who you can't get past the gatekeeper, this is the time of year to be calling, because it's amazing how many people go into holiday mode and shut down. And what I found is that I can sit here and use this time of year to reach out and connect with people. Now, here's what's going to happen. A couple things are going to happen. One, I'm going to be able to enter into discussions that I'd never be able to enter into in other times of the year. Why? Because things are just a little bit more relaxed. Oh, so you know what? This is the time you really hit that auto dial. Remember that auto connection where they say, "Hey, dial 4 for this department, 6 for this department, 9 for this." That's when you really, really reach out to that. And I'll tell you what, you'll be spot on and you'll be nailing it and you'll be making it happen. Second, here's the other piece that is so critical, so key, so good, is that when you're connecting with people, you're going to be connecting with departments that they're going to answer the phone. And you know what? They're going to be bored, or they're going to be just willing to talk. They will share with you more information. You see, so what I can do is I can use the auto connecting system to reach out to other departments and find out other information that I wouldn't normally be able to. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of building my dossier. I'm building my background file. So when I do get to the decision maker, I've got that much more information. But here's the reason I like this time of year. Now, one of the biggest reasons is few salespeople are reaching out. Most salespeople, "Well, no, it's a bad time of year, so I can't call. I'm not going to make calls." And yeah, and you know what happens? they wind up not getting the opportunities. So what I do is I'm going to reach out and I'm going to make connections right now. Now, here's a little trick that I found. And again, little technique, and I love doing this time of year. You reach an administrative assistant or you reach somebody and they say, no, they're on vacation till the first of the year. And I say, great. What day, what time would it be best for me to call when they do get back? And here's what I found. They generally don't steer you wrong. They by and large, they will not steer you wrong, and they'll be very forthcoming and give you. The first couple of days he or she gets back, it's just crazy. Why don't you call Thursday or Friday of that week? And I'll say, great, is there a particular time? Great. And I've even got to the point, would you mind putting me down on their calendar that I'll call them at that time? And I've even said that, and it's amazing how that administrative assistant who I reached during the holidays, who normally wouldn't talk to me, did talk to me, and was actually more open because, wow, I was working and they were working and everybody else was not working. The same thing works when I call during the holidays and I connect with actually the decision maker. Because the decision maker, especially with small business owners, if you're doing B2B selling to small business owners, they really love this. And I can't emphasize it enough. Now, this is the one time of year, and you've heard me talk about this before, I don't advocate leaving voicemails, okay? But let's leave that aside. I want to stay with very, very fresh material. Let's talk about how do we use geography, how do we use the calendar to work in our favor? One of the things that I don't hesitate to do is to try to grab other divisions of companies. Now, here's what's very interesting. I have reached out to other divisions and I'll sit there and I'll ask them questions. And it's amazing. Sometimes I can reach a remote office, a remote location. And it's amazing how much information they'll share with you. Now, they may not give you their name and so forth, but they may give you their name. But here's what I found. That's a great way that I'll say, hey, can you connect me? Anytime I can be connected internally, the decision maker is more likely to pick up. Now think about this for a moment. I remember in my corporate job, anytime my phone rang and it was an internal phone call, I answered it. Anytime it was an external phone call, I let it go to voicemail. I always did. That was just my policy. Why? Because my internal customers, I needed to satisfy. My external customers, chances are they were just looking to do business with me, so I did. So I will use another division to in turn get me into it. Now, here's another way that I use other divisions and gatekeepers in particular. Okay, I may call another division and they immediately say, no, you need to call the main number. Okay, thanks. Hey, you got 10 seconds? Can you share with me? What's it like at the main office? What's it like? What's it like? And I can ask them one question regarding the main office, the corporate number. And they go, oh, wow, I am so thankful I don't work there. It is absolutely chaos. Oh, really? Is there normally a time? Oh, well, yeah, you never want to call on Fridays or you never want to call on Monday. You see what I'm doing? I'm just gaining one little piece of information. Again, use remote offices. Now, one of the things we have not talked about is how do we use other tools? How do we use other tools, and can we connect with people by way of email? And yeah, by all means. And this is one of the reasons why I don't hesitate if I'm reaching a receptionist who is absolutely stalled out on me to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and send you some information if you don't mind. And if you see who you should route it to, feel free. I could really care less if they route it, and I hope they really don't. But what am I doing? I'm looking for their email. It's a way to, remember I shared with you earlier, the technique and the approach to get the email out of the administrative assistant. Now I'm using this a little different approach to get the email out of just purely the receptionist. But again, what am I learning? I'm learning the methodology that company uses. Because now what is it doing? It's not getting me anywhere per se, but it is helping me. Now, this is the same reason why I can reach out and nobody knows who to connect me to. I've used the auto thing, so I connect with sales. And again, some of you have heard me talk about this. I love connecting with the sales department because the sales department many times is the most junior salesperson is the one who's going to answer the telephone. And the most junior salesperson who answers the telephone is going to be the most probably forthcoming in information. So guess what? I can also use them to get, hey, what is your email? So at least I can send you a note to say thanks. I don't want to send them information. Never send that salesperson information about you. Never do. Because it won't wind up in the right hands. It will not wind up in the right hands. But I can sit there and say, hey, I just want to drop you a note to say thanks. And what's your email? So I get you in my contact. Because again, if I come up with some leads, I come up with some referrals, I want to be able to refer them to you. You see, what am I doing? I'm establishing a relationship. I'm learning how the system works. And what I'm also saying is, hey, what's your extension? What's your direct dial number? Again, what I'm doing is I'm looking for clues as to how their telephone system works. Again, I love using, these are all little approaches that I'm using. Now, some of you are sitting there saying, man, this is really, really complicated. I didn't realize prospecting could be this complicated. It's not. In fact, here's what I found. Prospecting is easier today than it's ever been. It's easier to walk through the door today than it's ever been. What? What do you mean by that? Nobody answers the phone. Nobody wants to see anybody. No, but I'm dead serious. Here's why I believe it's easier. A, fewer people are prospecting in meaningful ways. Most people are absolutely sitting there just throwing garbage out the door in whatever means they can, expecting it to hit. Well, throwing mud against the wall is not going to be too effective. Now, I'll admit, even a blind squirrel can find an acorn occasionally. But let's not kid ourselves. There aren't too many people that are doing it right. And yet we've got more tools out there than we've ever had. Because think about this. There's more information on every organization out there on the internet. There are more databases available, like InfoFree. There are more tools out there to help us be more effective. The challenge we have to understand is that the customer is more prepared than ever not to receive our phone call, not to receive our connection. That's why I have to be prepared. That's why I go through all of this pain to sit there and say, I've got to develop my strategy before I start prospecting in terms of understanding what are the 3 ways the call can go. And more importantly, if it goes to the gatekeeper, what are the I had 3 fingers, I apologize. What are the 4 ways that can go with the gatekeeper? And in each one of those, I've got to have a slightly different style. Now, the wording and the methodology you're going to use is going to vary depending upon your industry, depending on what you're selling, et cetera, et cetera. But the principle remains absolutely the same. Now, here's what I want you to really take this to heart. 1, I reach out to you. We'll say you're my prospect. I'm trying to reach you. I've got a phone number for you, and I get auto dial. Okay. What is my strategy going to be? I'm going to work my way through the different auto dial connections. I'm going to use 0, but I'm not going to use 0 the first time because 0 is going to probably get me to HR, somebody of interest who really could care less. Okay. I'm going to try to use other departments. 2, if I get connected to the person who is truly the receptionist, my whole objective is to never use the word buying or purchasing if I don't know who I'm looking for. I'm saying, hey, I need to be connected to the department that handles this. I'm looking for the department that keys in on this or the person who would be responsible for this, but I never use the word purchasing. If they sit there and ask, are you a salesperson? You're going to sit there and say, what I've got is I've got information from a industry standpoint that I want to review with them. I'm going to use a slightly different approach. And if I don't have a title with sales, I'm going to go ahead and say it. That's fine. 3, if they do look to connect with me, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, would you mind sharing with me their extension, just in case we get disconnected so I don't have to come back through you? What am I doing? I'm getting the phone number down. Now, if I do know who the person is, okay, I'm calling the receptionist and I'm asking who it, and I know it's supposed to be Ross. I'm going to say, I'm looking to connect with Ross. I do not use the person's last name. I will sometimes say, hey, Ross in engineering or Ross in that. That's okay. Because again, they may have multiple Rosses. That's fine. But I'm not going to go any further than that. My whole objective is to get you to connect. Now, they may say, what is the call about? And then I'm going to sit there and say the exact same thing. I've got information. I need to share with them information regarding X. I've got some questions we need to ask regarding X. I'm going to share with them. It's the same terminology I would use if they said, hey, who are you? What are you calling about? Now, the fourth piece is, what happens if what happens if I get to that receptionist and they absolutely don't want to block me, or they want to throw me into purchasing or into some other death-defying department? If I do wind up going there, that's okay. But I don't want it to go any further than I possibly have to. I just want to find out maybe who that person's name is and say, just curious about some insights and some information, but that's it. Don't go any further, because here's what's going to happen. Or, well, you need to go to the website. You need to fill out this. You need to do this. And then what happens is you're going to call somebody else, and you are going to get the decision maker you want to reach. And they're going to say, oh, have you spoken with anybody in purchasing? Well, you can't lie to them. Yeah, you have. What'd they tell you? Well, they didn't. Oh, great. Okay, fine. See, if they said, oh, well, no, they told me they had to go fill out this or do these forms, so forth. See, that now I'm locked in. I'm locked into purchasing, and I don't want to. So if I do get routed to purchasing, pull back. Just ask a very benign question and get off the phone. And no, I never want to call back at that time of day again and get that person. I want to make sure I try to use somebody else. Which brings me to the one final piece. Make a note when you're making your phone calls. Are you calling from your office line, your company phone line, or your cell phone? Always make a note whenever you're prospecting as to what phone you're calling from. Because again, what I found is it's amazing how many times I can just vary it up and I actually get connected to a different it's not that I get connected to a different person, but I'll get a different response. Because again, I'm no longer registering as, oh, wow, that's that. Oh, no, now I'm just a cell number. I'm just somebody else. Now, here's the other piece that I want to share with you when you do get that administrative assistant. You want to be asking them the same questions. You're just going to change the format, change the style around. And here's why. And I want to really hone in on this for just a moment. Many times what happens is the administrative assistant is far more influential than you will ever realize. I have closed many deals dealing only with the administrative assistant and only having the decision maker getting on for one final phone call when we sign the contract. It's amazing. Don't discount the influence of the administrative assistant. Because if you do wind up getting into dialogue with the decision maker, you want that administrative assistant on your side, because they're going to provide you with some very critical information. They're going to be able to share with you, hey, I sent over to him. Can you make sure that he or she looks at it and gets him back? Oh, yeah, I'll be happy to take care of that for you, Mark. Yeah. So you do never think for a moment that any gatekeeper you come in contact with is not somebody that you can't connect with and you should not connect with, because you do want to connect with them and you do want to create a relationship with them. Because, oh, by the way, guess what? That decision maker today, who's the administrative assistant, may very well be in the decision maker's seat permanently the next day, the next month, the next year. You see, I found prospecting it is, and please believe me on this, it is easier today. I thoroughly love prospecting. Why? Because it gives me the opportunity to help people see and achieve what they didn't think was possible. Now, I'm going to wrap this up here in just a moment. We said we'd keep this right at about 40 minutes, and I see right now we're at 40 minutes right on the money here. I want to say, hey, let's stay connected. Let's stay connected. But here's the big thing. I can't emphasize enough. Thanks to the folks at InfoFree. Thanks to the folks at InfoFree for being able to put this whole event on. And I really invite you to check out their system. Go to their website, check them out, because they've got a database and some tools that you can use. But here's a couple other things. A, that's my phone number. That's not my office phone number. That's my cell number. I want you to feel very free to reach out to me anytime you have a prospecting question. That's my email. That's not my office email. That's my personal email. Again, my whole objective is I want to see you succeed. I want to see you be incredibly successful. That's my objective. That's my goal for you. Because, hey, as we move into 2017, my goal is this. I want to make it the most successful year I've ever had. And the only way I can do that is by being able to say, hey, you've had the greatest year possible. Hey, Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter, and I want to say thank you very much and great selling. And thanks to the folks at InfoFree. Very much appreciated. Great selling.